Welcome to Lair the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, another in my series of heavy thoughts. This is where I take a moment to discuss some things that have been weighing on my mind. And I've made some videos lately, a video discussing live albums, and I have my legendary live album series, and it got me thinking about bands that had missed live album opportunities. And what I mean by that is bands that should have released a live album but didn't. And I should be more specific. They should have released a live album in a certain time frame because some of these bands did, especially nowadays, everybody has a live album somewhere. But there was a certain period in their time where they should have released a live album and they didn't. So in my opinion, it's like a missed opportunity. So, all right, when I get started here, I think you'll understand what I mean. All right, Van Halen, the David Lee Roth era of Van Halen, the original run of Van Halen. Now I know that they put out a live album with Dave when Dave came back in. There's a live album with Sammy, but this is an example to me of a missed opportunity. When Van Halen was, at their peak in 1980, the 1984 album, or even before that, imagine if they had put out an album instead of Dive or Down, like if they had put out a live album at that time, capturing them in like their early 80s when they were just on fire. Imagine songs from the Van Halen 1 and 2 and Women and Children First and Fair Warning. Imagine a live album with songs from those albums. That would have just been fantastic. And maybe they would have released 1984, probably their biggest seller. I don't know, they were all over MTV at that time, and maybe if things hadn't have gone south with Dave, maybe they would have released a live record. But to me, it's really a missed opportunity that they never released something live from the original David Lee Roth era. But when they eventually did, it just didn't feel the same to me. And Van Halen in the late 70s and the early 80s, they were just a band that was on fire. And their studio albums sounded like live albums, but in a live setting, they were just great. And it would have been so cool to have a live album from them with the way Eddie played guitar. He always threw in different fills and stuff, so that would have been so cool. So for me, that's a missed live album opportunity, the original David Lee Roth era. All right, next, how about The Police? I know they released the live album when they did like that reunion so many years ago, but it's surprising that during their original run, that they never released a live record. They were so popular. They were a really cool live band too, because they tended to kind of play things a little bit differently. They're just a three-piece, so the stuff had a different feel to it. Maybe if they had put out a live album around Zenyatta Mendata, that would have been, in my opinion, perfect timing. I have heard live recordings. They did eventually put out like this double disc thing that had some really early recordings, and in the early days, they were like a punk band. They had a lot of raw energy. That would have been cool too, like a live album, maybe after like the second album or something, Outlandis de Amor. Right around that era, it would have been really cool also. But I just think it's kind of a missed opportunity for the Police that they never released a live album when they were kind of at their peak there. All right, how about Def Leppard? Here's another group that you would have thought right around Pyromania, when they blew up really big, between Pyromania and Hysteria. It took so long for Hysteria to come out. It's shocking to me that the record company didn't say, well, let's release a live record. And for me, an album from the Pyromania tour would have been awesome, because they hadn't got so caught up with like Hysteria and the studio stuff and the studio trickery and all that stuff. The Pyromania, although it's a very well polished and studio done album, well-produced record. It still has some of the rockin' elements of High and Dry and, their early stuff. So to have a live album come out at the Pyromania tour when they were so popular with all those hits, plus it would have had, it would have had some of the earlier stuff too, would have been really, really cool, because when you hear live recordings of them from back in that era, they were a great, rockin', high energy band. I think as time went on, when they got so many studio overdubs and stuff, and they felt like they had to reproduce that stuff live, it sort of sucked some of the life out of them live for me. So for me, that's a missed opportunity. They should have released a live album right around the Pyromania, or maybe right after High and Dry. All right, next, Black Sabbath. The Ozzy years of Black Sabbath, the original 70 to 78. Now, I know that they put out Live at Last, but that didn't come out till 1980. And to me, and that album was never sanctioned by the band. The story behind that, their old manager had the rights to some live recordings that he had done, and he put that out in 80, 81. And the band was not happy about that. And the band, it has only been in the last so many years that the band has even embraced that album. They pretty much just ignored it, never really considered it an official part of their catalog. So it's really surprising to me that in the 70s, when everybody was releasing live albums in the 70s, that Black Sabbath never did that. They could have definitely have been a band that would have had a legendary live album. Imagine if they had put out a live album around Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, or Sabotage. Man, if you hear, and you can go on YouTube and you can see them on Don Kirshner's rock concert right around the Sabotage era, and they sounded just absolutely great, man. And even Live at Last, I like Live at Last. I like the set list on there, but I think if the band was more involved in it, if it had come out in the 70s, right around Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, Sabotage, maybe that whole era, that would have just really been a real bookend, really would have captured them for me at their peak. Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, Sabotage. As much as I like Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die, the band was just really creatively riding high with right around that Sabotage era. So a double live album would have just been an incredible thing. And for me, it's really, really a missed opportunity. Live at Last, Ozzy was already out of the band when that came out, and so it just, I like it, but it was just never handled the right way. They should have had an album out in the 70s. That would have been really, really cool. All right, next is Pink Floyd, the original, when Roger Waters was in the band. Now, I know that Umaguma, the side one of Umaguma, is live, but they never really put out a proper double live album. And if there was ever a band that probably should have, you would think it would have been Pink Floyd, because they were a very kind of experimental band live. They tried a lot of different things, and it's surprising that they never did. Now, they did have the Pink Floyd at Pompeii movie, which I absolutely love. And that just reinforces to me that they should have released a live record. And it's amazing that they didn't release that Pompeii soundtrack. There's really, I don't know, maybe in the last, 10 or 20 years it's officially been released. But I know for the longest time you could really only get it as a bootleg, or you could only hear that if you had watched the movie. And I love that movie, and they sound great on that. And it would have been so cool for them to just package that as a live record. Or even during, Animals, that era, or the Wall. It's just surprising to me that they never released a live record. They were a band that should have had multiple live albums from that era. I think it would have been, it would have been perfect for them. Something maybe right around the metal era, like with, Pink Floyd at Pompeii, and then maybe something around Wish You Were Here, or Animals, or The Wall. Something from that era would have been awesome also. So, all right, there you go. Those are 5 bands that I think had kind of missed a live album opportunities. Again, they all did eventually go on to release live records, and some of them have put out old recordings from these eras, but in that time frame, it just surprises me that these bands never did. A missed opportunity, in my opinion. I'll throw in a bonus one here. I was going to put in the Beatles also, because the Beatles never really officially released a live record. But for them, you know, they stopped touring pretty early in their career. And their early stuff, the shows that they didn't have the equipment back then and everything. So I can kind of understand how the Beatles never really released a live thing. But there, you can hear some live recordings from back then, and they were a really great live band. But so I kind of didn't put them on the list proper, but I'll throw them in there as a bonus bonus band. So all right, let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know some bands that you feel they may have eventually put a live album out, but did you feel had a missed live album opportunity, that they should have released a live album at a certain time and they didn't? Let me know in the comments some bands that you can think of. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, and make sure you rock hard and ride free.